of Pathway to 17 Summit. The Pathway to 17 Summit is a global virtual event focused on bringing together thought leaders, problem solvers, innovators, industry experts, and practitioners working together to solve today's greatest challenges. This year, Pathway to 17 Summit has 4 thematic theme areas and over 4 days. Yesterday, we had the day on gender equity, and you can catch up on the recordings if you miss any of the sessions from there. Today, we're focused on innovative and inclusive fintech, and then tomorrow will be job creating innovations and SDGs, and Thursday, building Africa's digital public infrastructure. So we're on day 2, but there's still an awful lot of exciting conversation to be had. So today is focused on innovative and inclusive fintech, and the stream has been cultivated by the Alliance of Digital Finance and Fintech Associations, or Alliance DFA for short. Alliance DFA is a global hub uniting regional and national associations to foster knowledge exchange, create synergies, amplify impact in the digital finance and fintech sector. By empowering our members with the resources to impact local markets, Alliance DFA strengthens the digital finance ecosystem globally, enabling the development of inclusive and responsible digital finance products and services. My name is Sarah Corley, and I'm the founder and CEO of Alliance DFA, and I'm really privileged to be here with you today. We're going to start today's stream with a very interesting discussion, new developments that have just happened, and we're going to be discussing the role of Fintech Associations in regulating the industry. We have 2 expert panelists with us today to help to have that conversation. Firstly, we have Sugandh Saxena. She is CEO of the Fintech Association for Consumer Empowerment, abbreviated to FACE. Sugandh has over 2 decades of diverse experience in fintech, financial inclusion, microfinance, the development sector, and technology. She's the CEO of FACE, and under her leadership, FACE has become a leading self-regulatory industry association for the fintech sector in India. Prior to this, she worked at Enfin, leading work in policy advocacy and developing the credit bureau and setting up their SRO function. We're also delighted that FACE is a member of Alliance DFA, and Sugandh also sits on the board of Alliance DFA and is bringing her expertise and experience to that role. Welcome, Sugandh.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here.
We also have our second guest, Anil Tadimeti, Director of Strategy and Regulatory Affairs at BureauID. Anil's expertise lies in financial analysis and leveraging data to drive effective outcomes. Previously, Anil was an officer with the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, where he supervised large financial institutions and steered key policy initiatives and their effective implementation. He has now moved into the private sector and is at BureauID, where he is crafting compelling go-to-market strategies for helping regulated entities solve the problems of fraud, compliance, of security. An interesting career change. We're delighted to have you on the panel, Anil.
Thank you, Sarah. Pleasure to be here.
So our conversation is going to center around the idea that fintech associations can play a greater role in self-regulating the industry. The aim being to enhance regulatory compliance, foster innovation, and address some of the challenges the industry faces. With the Reserve Bank of India, we'll abbreviate to RBI, recent launch of a framework designating fintech associations as self-regulatory organizations, this session is going to explore what this shift means for the future of fintech regulation. So I think before we jump into that amazing conversation, let's just reflect a little bit on why India, why this could happen. So let's start off, I think, with an overview of the fintech landscape in India and some of the successes and challenges it has faced. Sugandh, maybe you can kick us off.
Thank you, Sarah, and really welcome to audience who are part of this conversation. Again, before we even jump into fintech, I think it's, let me just talk a little bit about India. Of course, you all know it's the most populous country. It's also one of the youngest country. 2/3 of our people are less than 35 years of age. So just I think it's important to understand the demand side factors. We have a very high penetration of, smartphones and mobile phones. and also at a very cost-effective rate, which essentially means that we have this huge infrastructure which is connecting people, which is very important ingredient in the way we provide digital economy. Um, Similar to that, again, while this might look at an aggregated level high numbers, but within the country, there's a lot of differences in terms of income segments. So we are still, 2,500 GDP per capita economy, which essentially means that a lot of people are in sort of mid and low income segments, and as in country progresses, the biggest mandate is to give, increase the per capita income, so to speak. Again, a lot of people are in the informal sector, so, typical, you can say developed economy paradigm doesn't work here. So a lot of people are self-employed and working in sort of small jobs or maybe doing multiple jobs and so on, which also mean that, providing, financial services in a traditional way is something which may not be conceived here. So our problem statements are very different, our demand is very different, which essentially means that there's no way as a country we can provide access to financial services in a non-digital way. And now for a very long time, India has struggled to provide formal financial services, be it saving, be it credit, be it insurance to vast segment, and has been, working towards that. So with that as a background, I think this, digital financial services or fintech, however you defined it, because very important pillar of government intervention in the way, we look at the society, we look at the economy. And this has been a story for, I guess more than 2 decades now, right? Because it's sort of crystallizing in a much more, solid form now, but it has been a story. One of the biggest, sort of enablers of, fintech revolution in India has been the government and the regulatory support that we had, because from very early on that the government took initiatives around identity, which was biggest in terms of KYC, and today 99% of the people have this biometric authentication, which is very critical for the, financial services provider. Similarly, things that we know now of, DPI, digital public infrastructure, again, a lot of investment went into ensuring that, this payment layer, which is very important overall for the formalization, comes in. And UPI is something which we call in India, where, through mobile phones, you can do, using just mobile number, you can transfer money, has been a huge, huge success story overall in terms of removing the cash. And therefore, even if you're in the informal economy, you can provide data and evidence that, what you're earning, what your expenses are. So again, a very big boost, which supported the growth story, so to speak. And thirdly, as a country, India was always, ahead in terms of technology. So there is a huge, I would say, private sector involvement and government sector involvement generally in the technology. So IT sector is something which has been there. There we have a very, sound infrastructure of colleges, which essentially means that technology talent and pool is very readily available, which obviously is important when you talk about fintech. So I think these factors were critical, along with, of course, access to capital, which government facilitated in terms of, lowering barriers in terms of ease of business. I would also add, government support in terms of, startup ecosystem, which again was, very critical to ensure that these fintech companies can collaborate. And even from RBI perspective, the way they are looking at the collaboration between fintechs and regulated entities. So the regulatory frameworks allow you to do that, which give this partnership a thrive. So I guess like any recipe, good recipe, there are a lot of ingredients to it. And obviously each country is different and they take their own path to that solving for that. But India, just the sheer scale and diversity mean that uh, early adoption and pivoting around digital was very key to our fintech story. Landscape, I will perhaps let Anil talk about, but we are seeing generally, whether you talk about credit, huge penetration which fintechs have been able to do. Just to give an example, in the personal loan market, we see more than 2/3 of the loans coming, which are enabled through fintech. So that's a very, very huge number. Similarly, in the insurance premium, online premium, through fintech companies is perhaps account for half of the premium which are being collected. Uh, Same, I guess, payment side, 90% or even more UPI payment is through fintech. So, these are like very, very high numbers. So we have obviously achieved a scale and shown the value. Next stage is obviously, reaching out further deeper into, rural areas. Women, I guess, is important part of that story because women generally are excluded. We know the gap which is there in terms of digital financial services, and also making these products really help people improve their life. So showing the impact, not just in terms of scale and outreach, but in terms of how are we benefiting our people, how are we benefiting our society and economy, is something where more focus will come, I guess, the decade forward. So I'll pause here and let Anil add.
Yeah. Thank you, Sugandh. I think she illustrated all the challenges that we have as a country and how with technology, with the right kind of government support, with again capital, all of these have been able to be solved to some extent. But just to put things in perspective in terms of, for example, what she mentioned is it's about how we improve ease of living, right? I think that's how you would characterize. And then so inclusion is one aspect of it, but even in terms of other things where there's an interface between, let's say, a bank and a customer, right? Now, an onboarding exercise would mean a visit to a bank. That means somebody is now foregoing that day's work, or essentially, or at least for a few hours, right? Now, that span of, let's say, 48 hours is perhaps reduced to now less than 10 minutes, right? Now, that's a major Philip, in terms of how everything where you can do at your doorstep or at your fingertip, right? Again, thanks to the large penetration of smartphones we have, that's a major convenience factor, right? Which also puts in a virtuous cycle, right? And that encourages more of these, right, kind of transactions, payments, all of this. And now you get more people into the formal economy. But it's also helped, whether it's a traditional financial institution that you're talking about, concentrate more on their core competencies, right? Which is about how you accept deposits, how you provide loans, how do you do risk management, whereas the emerging technologies or how you use technology more efficiently, that can be brought in by fintechs in this partnership, right? And not just in terms of onboarding. In several areas, the operational efficiencies have gone up tremendously, right? Overall, uh, at least about 30%, savings is what they've been able to witness. Not just that, in terms of even how do you as a so while we're talking about large institutions and they may have again certain kind of momentum, right? But how do you enable even a startup to quickly accelerate, right? If you're a startup, can I plug into NPCI's network? Can I get onboarded to them? Can I offer UPI as payments, right? So those are aspects in which there is less of this gap, right? In terms of, or an entry barrier that actually, levels the playing field, makes it more competitive. Fintechs have also been instrumental in ensuring that there's greater customer retention, right? We are in a hyper competitive environment. So how do I ensure that there's the right kind of messaging or targeting to my customers? How do I reward them? So it has all these perhaps intangible benefits that we may not necessarily look at, but overall how it helps the ecosystem grow, and of course having customer centricity and convenience in mind. Those are factors that we should look at as well, and those have been noteworthy successes.
Thank you both for sharing. I love the word recipe that you use there, Sugandh. It's sort of like having things like, your infrastructure, your technology, the focus on digitization, the demand side, and the ability to scale, has really allowed fintech to take its place and then start to partner with other organizations, filling those gaps, really encouraging meaningful usage that benefits everybody in the ecosystem as well as the consumer. So fintech really seems to have landed in a sweet spot. And what I also heard from you both was, actually government has been really, influential in driving this industry, driving the ecosystem, and creating this collaboration. So, Anil, you were at RBI for many years. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what their strategy and vision for fintech was and is.
Yeah, so I think the key word today is earlier, for whatever reasons, right? There's a trust that needed to be built, right? And then you had to show credibility, and that was a rather long, time or gestation period that was involved, right? Today, inherently, there is greater acceptance, and there is obviously a greater sense of how this collaboration can yield the right outcomes, right? In terms of innovation, right? How you can improve customer service, how you can improve security, on all these fronts, right? Um, if you look at how RBI has envisaged this and gone about it in a systematic manner, right? Not in a piecemeal fashion. Started with something like, opening up a regulatory sandbox where you could test products which, under the extant regulations, may not have been permitted, but would benefit different cohorts of customers, right? Whether it's people who are not financially literate, or who cannot access, let's say, UPI payments for that matter, right? How do you do offline payments, but offer the same kind of convenience, instant transfer, all of those things in different facets, right? It started with that. Then they also established a fintech department where you could have more constructive engagements, right, with different form of fintechs. Because again, fintech that way is an umbrella term. You're essentially talking about somebody who's helping in payments, somebody who's helping in lending, somebody who's just providing infrastructure. Companies like Bureau, which are more to do with RegTech, compliance, fraud prevention, all of them. So again, that's a heterogeneous, right, set of entities that you need to engage with, formulate, and also get the kind of policy initiatives that need to be driven, right? And India that way was one of the first markets where they opened up video KYC, right? Again, obviating the need for somebody to actually go and physically visit a bank branch, any of those aspects for you to complete, and just to prove who you are, right? And it shouldn't be that difficult. That's what they envisaged. And then there've been series of other pronouncements which have furthered that kind of convenience without compromising on the regulatory or security aspects. They've also established a subsidiary, the RBI Innovation Hub, in order to ensure that this engagement also, like, the innovation is not stymied, right? In some sense, there's a perception that once you become regulated, then you cannot move as quickly, or you cannot do everything that you wanted to do, which can impede the pace of it, can impede the extent of it. But this is where you can have those meaningful conversations. You can actually foster a culture of innovation, but bringing that technology in the financial services space, which can help you get the outcomes faster, right? But more importantly, I think, just in terms of how you also mentioned at the beginning, right? By having this framework now, by recognizing a body like face, the idea is now you can do this in an orderly way, but also ensure that they're meeting the right governance standards. They're meeting they have the right culture internally in order to comply with the regulations that they touch upon. And also, as a collective, right, you are able to espouse issues that affect everyone, and then pave the way towards all of it, right? And for getting the right outcomes. I think one of the key areas is they've also realized, with success of UPI or some of the other initiatives, now how can we take this to other countries, especially other emerging economies, where kind of challenges are similar, but you can use the innovation that's done here in order to benefit them. That's the goal of sustainable development goals, right? And that's what we are here for today as well. So I think that's the kind of replicability that they're trying to also look at, and how all of us can come together.
I love that. And certainly we're very much used to concepts of sandboxes, fintech departments. We're seeing more innovation hubs cropping up around the world. So it's great to see that replicability, and that then can be customized and contextualized to the location that they're in, because not everybody obviously will have the same conditions or in the same places where India is. But I loved how you described that. It was a clear strategy, and obviously moving towards self-regulation as part of that strategy. Why self-regulation? And what is it that's going to add to this strategy?
So I think the number of elements when you look at the way this has been envisaged, and again, it's a deliberate action, right? One is, given how technology always outpaces, right, in terms of how it gets incorporated into your day-to-day affairs, and just the fact that you need a sort of balancing mechanism, right, between that innovation, between compliance, regulation, and in this case, an SRO can form that bridge or the right layer, right, in order to create that balancing act and make sure that things are done in a sustainable manner, right? So you're not trying to put too many brakes. At the same time, you're not, completely letting everything go as people wish for, without looking at risk mitigation, any of them, right? So in this case, it's important that you have a body with the right mindset, with the necessary expertise, which can do this work, right? At the end of the day, there's also that constraint in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, right? You're not dealing with just one set of institutions. It's not just lenders. It's not just payment providers. It's a whole lot of right, an entire gamut of different types of functions that each organization, even within an SRO, does. And then, by virtue of being that collective, where you are able to gather that market intelligence faster, you're able to adapt to innovation faster, or you're able to also envisage risks and then mitigate faster. So that's how an SRO can play a critical role, right? And not just purely in that sense, but by doing this, they are also able to highlight the right kind of issues now that the regulator needs to look into, where perhaps there's a need for a new framework, for a new policy. They need to review some of them, because every circular, every notification that was issued perhaps, let's say, 10 years ago, right, may not be relevant in today's context. Now, how do you, but as individuals, if as individual member institutions, if we keep asking the regulator, right, they'll be inundated in this deluge, right? And to form a coherent body which can highlight the right issues, get the right response, not just with RBI. In that sense, FACE has done incredible work in building that trust with multiple organizations, with government bodies, where they become the first line of defense as well, right, in that sense. And also to disseminate information in the right manner, get the right kind of responses. So that way, the ecosystem itself completely benefits in all these aspects, right? And that's the way we are looking at it as well.
I love that, seeing the an association as a bridge, or a connector, being able to help everybody speak together quicker, resolve issues quicker, identify problems quicker, speed of innovation. It just sort of that, which I think you said, sort of coherent collective voice, that really resonates with me. And Sugandh, I know you've done so much work in creating this organization. Firstly, I want to congratulate you for being the first SRO for fintech in India. So many congratulations for that. And of course, we'd love to know more about what mandate, what are the sort of criteria that you were required to sort of have. Why did you decide to become an SRO, and moving into sort of what mandate do you now have?
Thanks, Sarah. So it has been a journey for us in that sense. Even when we started out 4 years back, the concept at that point was very clear that we do want to become an SRO. This was before in digital lending guidelines came, which was watershed moment, because for the first time there was something very clearly RBI stipulated in terms of regulatory framework. So in that sense, our roots or DNA was self-regulation. That is how initially FACE was conceptualized, and that is how the name was came, right? We are an association for consumer empowerment, which is very different in that sense, the way you look at association. So that's part of our work. Of course, in the beginning, we were very focused on the lending ecosystem, which has changed now because, initially RBI, when started thinking about self-regulation in general, something which was there in microfinance, but, there's more and more thinking around self-regulation. And I see the point there, right? We all have different, verticals, so to speak, but those lines or those boundaries are also blurring. So you will see a lending app offering insurance and payment, and then vice versa. So I think this neat definition is not very helpful. The way you look at the fintech ecosystem as a whole, you look at the opportunity and also the risk. So I think that was one element of it. So and then other thing is when we look at very narrow way, it reminds me of that proverbial elephant where you look at the, tail and you look at the ears, really don't get the full picture, right? So I think from that point of view, RBI was very forward looking to imagine, while it might look overwhelming at this point to a lot of people, that how do you really combine so many different elements of it, but that exactly is the point, right? That we want to combine all the elements so that we can see the complete picture and therefore act in a more coordinated way across financial sector regulator, across products and services. So I think it was very natural. So as SRO framework came in earlier this year, we started more and more thinking around it, and had a discussion within membership. We felt that while our genesis was credit, let's take a plunge and leap of faith and evolve into something bigger. It's a good opportunity, big opportunity, and we really want to sort of be respectful for what the regulator is expecting, and do whatever best we can do to do that. So so from a RBI perspective, I think one of the key criteria was that it has to be representative body of fintechs. So something which we are not there yet, but idea is to really move ahead and get all kinds of fintech into the system so that we do not narrowly pursue a particular interest group or a particular dimensions of fintech and see the fintech system as a whole. So that was a very fundamental, criteria for us. Second, I think from a RBI perspective, as Anil was mentioning, it's very important to have a right kind of association who can take up this responsibility, because when you are trying to change the industry, or you are trying to set the rules of the game for the industry, it's important that a governance and the culture within that industry body is very impartial and independent. And RBI, in the framework, if you go through it, it really has unpacked a lot of these things in a very clear way, so that as an industry body, you know what your mandate is. So not just in terms of when they say, for example, independence, what it means. So in terms of governance, in terms of management, in terms of your financial revenues and so on. So they have really articulated their vision of different elements very clearly, and that is what we sort of stick to. Third, I think important element from their perspective was that uh, uh, the functions that we do, right? When you say SRO, it's a one word, what it means, right? So I think again, lot of deliberation has gone to say that this is what we mean. One, of course, is self-regulation, which essentially means putting standards for the industry and monitoring them. But there are so many other development functions which an SRO is supposed to do, which includes getting right kind of information about the industry. We are closest to the market, being part of the aggregation of members. So we should be first one to know what is the challenge that companies are facing, what is the challenge that consumers are facing. So that is very important. So whole information and knowledge around it. Second thing is really, as they say, culture or nurture the sector, right? How do you really ensure that members, many of them are very young companies and they are coming every day into the space. How do you ensure that they are also able to, provide a very compliant product and solutions to the space? Because it's also important from the competition perspective. Why should only the large companies be able to do that? So again, very important role for us to ensure that we are able to provide that role. And again, as I was saying, it's important for us to continuously look at what the customer is experiencing. Again, very diverse country, we don't want digital divide to, create another problem of anything, right? It could be over leverage, it could be people not knowing what it is happening. And I would still think these are very early days for the digital financial services. So anything which does not go right may really impact not the existing customer base, but also there are so many who are yet to be reached. So that is where role of SRO is very important, and I think I really like one line which is part of the regulatory framework, which says we really want to harness the creative potential of fintechs, but also address very firmly with the idiosyncratic risk, right? So I think that sums up that idea is to really use fintech for good, but we will not let risk to take the center stage in any way. So I think you have to keep eye on both legs, both things to ensure that this happens. Yeah.
I love that there, Sugandh. One of the things that we talk about a lot at Alliance DFA is, having a clear idea of who you are as an association and, being independent, being holistic, focusing on the whole industry, but also being very clear about if you're expecting your members to have good governance, and you as an organization too have to demonstrate what that looks like. And I remember when we very first met, we really aligned on what is a well run, a purposeful association, what that might look like. So it's amazing to see that being recognized now, not only just by people like us that really see the value of industry associations, but the regulator too, and more people as well, I think, beginning to realize that, as you say, these associations are are able to access knowledge about what is working, what are the challenges, what are the successes in the industry, but also are able to be connected to the consumers and making sure that, I guess we're not doing any harm, not creating any further exclusion, but actually improving inclusion by the products and services that you're developing. So I know I was very excited when I saw RBI releasing this and also putting that framework in place, because actually it's a super helpful framework that anyone who's running or thinking of starting a fintech association can actually start to think about structuring their own association against. They might not be an SRO immediately, but at least it helps them start to build their association. And yeah, it's three little words. It sounds very simple when you say SRO, but we know that the volume of work behind that is enormous. So perhaps you could tell us just a little bit more, Sugandh, about how will you interact and engage with RBI? What do you have to tell them and inform about? Are there things that you have to do as being this SRO with the RBI?
Yeah, so actually, we are very blessed to have a very open regulator in India, right? So even when we were not SRO, in that sense, RBI interacts very widely with industry. Fintech department has, now put up a system where they do monthly interaction with all the fintechs, and they do something in their office itself where people can just go and clarify their, questions and so on. So that way, RBI is very, open and welcoming in terms of taking feedback from the industry. And for us also, obviously, there's a structure reporting that we will be doing as a part of SRO. But, we are always in touch with them in terms, if we are seeing anything, they are also giving us feedback and so on. So that is, I would say everyday work for us in terms of being very close to RBI. And I think there are two important functions there. One, I think as an industry, we are able to pass on right messaging from the regulator, because sometimes people may not see, completely understand why something has happened. And while RBI does a lot of articulation of these things, perhaps it is possible that, you're not able to understand them fully or entirely. So in that sense, we have a very important role. We see ourselves as an important role to understand, pass on that macro picture, and so that industry can find its own place in that overall, financial sector, and be respectful of the boundaries which are there. And similarly, on the other side, from an industry perspective, different kinds of products and things are there, different challenges companies are facing. We are able to, pass on that information in a very objective fashion for the overall robust ecosystem. So both channel, this two-way communication, which is now possible in a more, I would say, proper manner, because as a collective we can pass on information in an aggregated fashion rather than different signals going to the regulator, is very important as we look forward for the fintech sector.
Great, that two-way or communication with you acting as that bridge, again showing that importance. We often think of fintech as one end and the regulator at the other, and one is very much focused on risk and managing that and making sure that there's stability and no harm to consumers. And then on the other side, we have organizations that really want to do amazing things. They're excited about technology and innovation and don't always have the same conversation together, but that's a lot of what you'll do is bringing those two types of entities together to have this really important dialogue. And anyone who's listening, if you have any questions for Anil or Sugandh, please pop them in the chat and we'll get round to them in just as soon as we can. We've got a couple more questions that we've got slated that I've got for them both, and then we'll come to your questions. So coming back to my questions, Anil, you were a regulator. Now you are very much industry. You're very much that innovation and driving, change end of the spectrum. Also a member of FACE. What are you seeing as the benefits of the industry from this move towards having SROs?
Shara, I think what Sugandh mentioned at the beginning, right? Even before, if you were to call it this anointing, right, by the RBI, before that as well, they were trying to function and get things in order, right? And for us, again, as an early stage startup, getting the right pulse of the regulator, understanding what is kosher, what is not, how do you operate. So those are things that can help us direct and then operate in the right manner, right? And then they've taken great initiative in just furthering initiatives on multiple aspects, again not just restricted to lending but also with onboarding, right? Multiple of those initiatives where the regulator is actually quite receptive to the suggestions coming from FACE, right? And then all of us have benefited from them in that sense. And they've also had clear guidelines in terms of how they want to collaborate or what lines they go for and how these representations need to be done. So by virtue of operating at a higher standard, you get ingrained into that side of culture where that you need to function in a certain way, right? Perhaps the biggest benefits are in terms of how I remember FACE, formed working groups on some of these pertinent issues, just in terms of what perception of digital lending, how do you overcome, frauds, what are the checks that, as a consumer, right, for customer education, awareness, and again, given the peculiarities that you face in India, right, how do you cater to all of them and see that these are probably the fundamental issues that need to be tackled, right, in terms of how you get the right sense of where things are heading, how you can champion the right causes, and how you can perhaps help in again instilling the right set of probably confidence measures or for customers, because we are almost at the cusp, right? There are obviously early adopters, there have been certain movers in any of these, and those typically happen to be the people who are living in urban areas, but we don't want to be confined only to them, right? The idea is to reach every person, right? And that means there's still probably 500 million people, right, who need to now get onto that bandwagon. So that's where all of these come together. But purely in terms of both having that interface with regulators and making sure they get to understand our viewpoint and right, try to evaluate in that sense, and also having that customer interface where they also perceive us in the right manner. So I think those have been quite significant.
Great. And so, Gand, maybe you can add to this, what are you hoping or seeing that the impact that you're making on the industry and consumers?
I think, as digital financial services is taking root, we have also seen a lot of concerns around data. I guess that is something which is taking center stage in the minds of consumer for sure. We see them, they are more concerned about data. So thinking is evolving. And also with the stakeholders, right? There's, if you see any sort of Indian sort of app, it's integrating with multiple player, right? So the way this unpacking of digital financial services is happening in terms of distribution, product, and balance sheet kind of thing, it's fairly complex, and there are layers of companies which are involved. So how to ensure that all this node is good enough in terms of data governance, how data is being used, transparency. I think that would be one very big area of work where we all have to see that while we do not want to stop innovation because data is the power, but how do we do it in a way which is secure and robust and trustworthy? So you will see that as a one big work area for us. Second thing, which again is a lot of emerging economies and even most many developed economies are facing, is this whole issue of cyber threats, cyber crimes, and fraud, which is becoming more and more critical. And again, there, how do we as industry help our consumers deal with, understand these things? Of course, there's a lot of initiatives which government is doing, but I guess, the sheer scale means that industry also has many responsibility on that front. So I think that is one area where we see, a lot of effort has to go in terms of standardization, putting in place mechanism, and we collaborate. And again, no, none of these problem can be solved by one company or few companies. It's something which is collective effort is required. So I would think, and because these things are very fundamental to customer trust, how they are looking at their information being used, and also what they are doing is safe and secure. I think important from a penetration of digital financial services going forward. So
Great. Now I'm going to come back to you, Anil, because you mentioned how fintech is also playing a role with other regulated entities in the space. So it's not just about standing alone. Often, it's about the work that we're doing around collaboration. So how will having, SROs also impact on those regulated industry, or and the other partners, creating this enormous, ecosystem of digital financial services?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Sarah. So, just to continue what Sugandh mentioned, right? I think one of the biggest threats that we are dealing with is how there is this large proliferation of, digital fraud, cybercrime, all of this, right? And this is where data actually plays a crucial element in stemming the rise of these elements. Because in essence, today it's not about one individual trying to do this, but you have syndicated operations, right, that do this. So it's not enough for you to just identify one person. You need to identify the whole network. It could mean 20, 50 people and thousands of such establishments, right, across the country. So having a sort of repository in this case where again, face as a neutral body can be the repository and right, make sure that people get the right information, they use it for the right purpose. Now that can be a force for good, right? But that's just one way in which we can work together. But even some of the other aspects. So the biggest concern, for example, when it comes to digital lending, that the regulator has expressed time and again is in any AI-driven decision, how do you ensure there's no discrimination, there's no bias, there's transparency, right? So which means there's some form of guidelines that you need to enact, or some form of at least explainability that you need to provide, right, in terms of why a certain decision has been taken. So transparency in that manner. So these are large areas that affect our operations on a daily basis. So that's where the industry, whether again within within fintech plus let's say regulated entities, all of us have to come together in order to solve these issues, because inherently we'll still be relying on all these aspects, but using somebody like Face, in order to champion our cause, and then, making sure that we all adhere to certain standards, that's going to be a big lift up. Because even if you look at what the regulator is doing today, regulator is moving from a rules-based, right, regime to a principle-based regime, right, where the focus is more on outcomes rather than what kind of inputs or what kind of processes you have, right, which means that there is certain leeway that's already granted, but you'll have to ensure that it functions within a certain framework. So in that sense, having an institutional body is what will help us in aligning multiple stakeholders, right? That's where the biggest challenge is. And in fact, even kind of work they've already done is having also the right kind of inputs from, say, law enforcement agencies, right, that can help you tackle these kind of cyber crimes faster and nip them in the bud.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because, when you're working on your own in a silo, that's when you start to sort of experience those challenges. And perhaps don't realize that everyone else around you is experiencing the same challenges, whether that's about maybe not understanding a regulation, or maybe it's around cybersecurity or data or whatever it is. Actually having that dialogue, and as an industry, finding an approach that can work for the majority, because it's always very hard to have something that works for everybody. But that sort of is a key role, really, of of having an industry organization. Sugandh, I'm really keen to know, there's obviously a lot of work. You probably need about 100 staff members to be able to do some of it. And we know you don't have that many, but beyond just resource, what challenges lay ahead for Face, in this new role? But also, what do you really want to, beyond, obviously you talked about data protection and cybersecurity, but beyond that, what are your key challenges for the year ahead?
I guess institutionally, for us to again demonstrate value beyond credit ecosystem is very important for us. So while a lot of expertise and problem and solution lies, because this is what we have done in last 3 years, bringing same rigor, same value proposition similar to other segment is a test of our test of trust which regulator has put. So we are very cognizant of that, and therefore we are moving in that direction. And hopefully, strategically, as we bring more kinds of fintech, creating very tangible value for them is important for us. So I think that we see as a big sort of transformation and big test for us. Second, I think, again, as I said, industry is extremely diverse in terms of, you look at any dimension, you will see diversity. So in that, how do we build consensus? How we bring all of us together and arrive at, minimum standards or maximum, I would still think maximum standards, to say that, okay, this is what we would do, is again going to be a journey for us. We have done something, of course, in lending, but, maybe it was still perhaps less complex. Other segment, there could be even more complexities. So how do we really ensure that, what we are doing is something where entire industry is rallying around it, and they have a trust that this is good for them. Not everything might be completely in their favor, but that's the point, right? We all thrive together and we sing together. So I guess bringing that feeling of, I would say, collective strength is going to be thing. Again, it's a cultural thing, right? It's not technical thing you can do that way. You have to invest in those relationships with the stakeholders, with your members, hearing them in and out, they, even the smallest problem. That's going to be what will take us ahead, because I think that as an association, it, that is what matters.
I agree. I think you've both used the word. If I had to pick one word, you've both used a lot during this conversation. It's that word trust. And with trust, to build trust comes relationships. And you have to feel like you're getting value from a relationship, but also you need to feel like you're contributing. So that industry associations are about relationships, whether that's with the regulator, whether it's with the industry, or even thinking about consumers, actually feeling like you are a body that truly listens, and acts, right? Because again, listening is great, but if we don't stand up for what it is that we're trying to champion and believe in, there's also a lack of kind of teeth, for want of a better word, to that association. So you have to have the smile and the teeth. I think I've just made something new up there, but I think but you have to have that relationship, but you also have to be able to have if someone is not doing what is needed, the negative impact that could have on the whole industry, on the consumers, you have to tackle it, right? And we've had a lovely question that's come in from the audience. Mulageta from Ethiopia has said, they don't have a Fintech Association there. Well, let me tell you, you do actually. So please pop your email in the chat, and I will connect you to your association, because they're just getting going in Ethiopia. But they've got a question: if there is no Fintech Association, or perhaps if there is one in early stages, Sugandh, what advice would you have for those Fintech associations to get started?
I think I can share the face experience. I think I'm told that it started with a WhatsApp group, right? Some of the founders came together, they discuss risk that they are seeing, what are they experiencing, and eventually it led to where we are. So you don't have to formalize everything from the beginning, which can be cost intensive, but it's important that as an industry, particularly some of the significant players, they believe in the association, because that is very important. They would have wherewithal to support the association in the beginning. What they do as a market leader is very important, because industry invariably follows the market leaders. So I think I would feel that you can start with something very basic and see how it is going, and path will come to you, right? You will know that if it is creating value, then you can formalize it later on.
And of course, here at the Alliance, we also have a number of programs, resources, webinars that will help you grow from that idea, that WhatsApp group, into becoming a legally formalized and recognized association. So do reach out to me. It's easy, Sarah at alliancedfa.org, and we'll connect you to the resources and other communities or other people that are already trying to do this. So if you can get together, an industry doesn't need lots, and especially in its early stages, doesn't need 24 Fintech associations. It actually needs one or two really strong, focused organizations. So do reach out to me. And I kind of want to sort of use that same question to ask you is, if we've got people out there who have started a Fintech association but wants to grow their membership, what kind of value would you want to see from them in order to want to join them as a member?
Yeah, I think it's so. In terms of how we can look at I think the best part is, as a common group, what kind of challenges do we solve, right? And what kind of expertise do we bring in, right? And then finding commonality there. So again, for example, it's ideal if we can have representation across different kinds of functions or business models that you have, so that way you get that diversity. But even if that's not the case, what you could still do is just identify the specific problems that you want to encounter, and then you also need a lot of clarity, right, from different stakeholders in this, something from regulators. If that's the problem that you want to go after, then how do you make sure that you have the right representation, you have the right ear of the regulator, and how you're able to craft that and then approach them. If it's more about just nurturing the ecosystem or building a collaboration between, let's say, fintechs and your traditional financial institutions, then what kind of standards, right, in terms of especially technology, right? That's something that can again bring in level playing field, make it easier, because a lot of times even we as startups face this right issue where because of certain legacy systems or the way they're architected, it's not easy for them to integrate as soon as they may want to, or any of these challenges, right? So it's important to have that sort of interoperability, right? Then you're not dependent on just one institution, or everybody having to go through the same pain of doing the same work, right? There's no point in reinventing the wheel when you can already. So if you can bring a technological lens and ease this process for everyone involved, I think that just makes that just crunches the time involved a lot, and then the compounding effect starts becoming more apparent sooner. So I think in that way, again, for example, even in our association with Face, we probably not one of the early members, but still some of the ones which came in sooner, right? Because we realized that the kind of problems that we're trying to solve, and again, like Sugandh mentioned it, just the way they were trying to go after. So if I want to talk about this problem, right, it's about customer empowerment, right? And that's something that resonated with us, right? It's not about solving something related to lending, but that sets up, and that now you're dealing with the right people. So I think
Thank you
having
so
that
much,
mission.
Anil. We need to wrap up now to be able to finish, but I love that. Thank you very much
Yeah.
for reminding people to have a customer or a technology, solve a problem. That's a big thing. Start the dialogue, get your association up and running. And then we're also here, and Sugandh's in our community, as is Anil, as others, to help you create that association to make impact. We need to think about associations being a bridge, a force for good, and ways in which we can create guidelines, codes of conduct, and solve industry's challenges for the betterment of everybody. Thank you so much, Anil. Thank you so much, Sugandh. I really enjoyed the time with you today. And keep watching, everybody. We've got 3 more amazing conversations coming up. Thank you.